Change your heart. Look around you.
Law says she reported the abuse, but nothing happened.
Change your heart. It will astound you. I need your loving like the sunshine. Everybody's gotta learn sometime.
Friends, today I have a story that made my blood boil, mainly due to the senseless nature of it. You see, the cases that are the most difficult for me, not just to research, but to even make content on, are those that involve a child's life being taken. While some would argue that all murders are senseless, and to an extent I would agree, it is the murder of the child that is the most difficult to understand. The ones that are even worse in my opinion is when the authorities have been given opportunity after opportunity to save the child and the authorities fail. And it seems that most of the time after the death of a child who had open files with the Department of Children's Services, or more often referred to as CPS, there's always a community uproar, and while it appears on the surface that an investigation, at least within the department, would be made, it is only on the rare occasion that something is truly done and charged. Welcome to the tragic story of Ricky and Conrad Morales. Ricky and Conrad Morales were brothers that were born into a family and system that practically guaranteed that they never stood a chance. They were born to a drug-addicted mother who sold drugs to support her habit. Their young childhood was one that was filled with drug abusers, drug deals, violence, SWAT teams, child protective services, extreme physical abuse, and neglect. They and their siblings were in and out of protective custody by CPS constantly. Wow, what a disgusting way to start a life. When their mother, Rosa Morales, was sentenced to prison on drug charges, she sent 13-year-old Conrad to live with her brother, Raul, who was a convicted felon, and his wife, Cathy Sarinana, who were living in Randall, Washington at the time. 10-year-old Ricky was sent to live with his grandmother. Ricky did not do well with grandma, telling a trusted teacher, "My life is not worth living," and writing, "Die Ricky, die" on his arm. The school feared that the 10-year-old was suicidal. Child Protective Services, who had Ricky admitted to a psychiatric facility for treatment, said he was placed under the supervision of social worker Elia Godinez. By this time, Rosa had been released from prison but was in no position to reclaim Ricky or Conrad. And something has to be said to Rosa. The fuck were you thinking, you silly cow? Fix yourself. According to Rosa, the social worker told her, "Conrad seems to be doing fine in Washington, so why don't you send Ricky to Washington too? You've got 1 week to send him to Washington, or I'm going to court and your kids are going back into foster care." So this social worker, in other words, pressured Rosa into sending the other kid, so both kids are now in one location. In hindsight, I guess it would have been in the best interest of these children for the social worker to have done her job and sent the case back to family court. But instead, Ricky was sent to live with Uncle Raul and Aunt Cathy. Now at first, with the two brothers now in one household, everything seemed okay. Raul reported to his family that both boys were excelling in school, getting good grades, making friends, and playing on the local sports teams. He wove a tale that painted an idyllic life, with the boys prospering and flourishing in their new home. But soon, the family would learn that had all been a monstrous lie. Within a few months, neighbors, police, and the boy's sister reported that both Conrad and Ricky were being physically and sexually abused. And it was learned that Ricky had never been enrolled in school but Conrad was. Classmates reported that Conrad started wearing makeup to hide the bruises and complained about his uncle hurting him. After local police notified Washington Child Protective Services, they opened an investigation only to close the investigation and call the allegations unfounded. Life for these brothers continued, a living hell. When their mother, Rosa, finally was ready to bring the boys home to California, Raul made excuses. He said he couldn't afford their airfare. The first real sign of something severe happening was when the boys' mother pressed the issue in October of 2005. Raul and Cathy reported that Conrad had run away from home. They said that he'd been acting out and had become a discipline problem both at home and at school. They said, "You want your son to come home? Okay, we can afford it, but the real reason why we said we couldn't afford it is because we woke up one day and he ran away." Raul claimed that they were frantically searching for Conrad, but that it would be difficult because Conrad had run away with an older gay lover. He told the family that Cathy was so distraught he was sending her and their 2 young children to live with her sister in Sacramento, California in October of 2005. But Raul vowed not to leave Washington without Conrad. Both Raul and Cathy told social services that Conrad had been sent to live with a different relative out of state. And again, social services thought, okay, fair enough, and they closed the investigation. Child goes missing and they're like, okay, and they do nothing about it. Wankers. Ricky and Conrad's aunt, Berta Ceballos, went to the address that Raul had given in Sacramento on Christmas Eve 2005 to visit with the boys. She discovered that Raul had given them a fake address. On Christmas morning, Ricky called the Ceballos home and begged to be allowed to return. The family began to make plans for Ricky to return home. Sadly, it would all be in vain. On the evening of December 25th, 2005, when most children have played themselves out with their new toys and stuffed themselves with Christmas cookies and food, Ricky Morales lay dead in a closet. Not that Raul or Cathy could be bothered with a little thing like Ricky dying. No, they sat down with family and friends for a Christmas feast while Ricky died from massive internal injuries. Ricky complained of not feeling well after he was beaten, and Ricky refused to eat his dinner. Cathy was appalled and offended that Ricky would refuse to eat her cuisine. For punishment, Raul ordered Ricky to clean the apartment's bathroom. It appears that Ricky was not working fast enough for Raul's liking, so he kicked him. Ricky vomited and Raul kicked him again. Not satisfied, Raul kicked the boy a 3rd time. Then he dragged the boy into the bedroom and threw him in the feces-strewn closet, where he repeatedly kicked and stabbed the boy as Ricky tried to escape. I can't help, as I'm reading this, get emotional. Like, Raul, like, what? I don't have any words to describe this dumb motherfucker. Then he slammed the door and went to eat his Christmas dinner. When Cathy went to check on Ricky hours later, she found him dead. Frightened, she called the police. Ricky was pronounced dead on December the 25th, 2005. And on December the 26th, 2005, both she and Raul were brought in for questioning by Corona police. Raul admitted to disciplining Ricky, but never meant to hurt him. What do you mean discipline him? You kick him? You hit him? Because, what, he wouldn't clean the bathroom or he wasn't doing it fast enough? That's not discipline, dickhead, that's abuse. There's a difference. Both Raul and Cathy were promptly arrested. Early in an interview that lasted almost 4 hours, Raul told Detective Jeff Edwards that Ricky had started out as a good kid, but the boy became disrespectful. Raul said he wouldn't obey Cathy. He lied, he wet his bed, he would refuse to eat or would throw up afterward, and he'd cut himself with kitchen knives. So, my son is 2 years old. He lies a little bit, as children do. Sometimes he leaks from his diaper. What does that mean? I then go and abuse him too? What kind of thinking is this? When taking away TV privileges and toys didn't get Ricky to shape up, Raul explained to police he and Cathy began beating the boy. Firstly, they used a belt, and after that wasn't enough, Raul would. In the interview, several times, Raul appeared distraught, sobbing, and sometimes wiping his eyes as he described realizing Ricky was dead. The police reported that Raul's eyes became moist at one point as he talked about his wife. But whenever Raul described disciplining Ricky, police said they didn't see any tears. In the interview, Raul described kicking Ricky in the chest each time he came to check on how the cleaning was going, and finally grabbing the boy and putting him in the closet where the family made him sleep. He slept in the closet? What? Raul said he checked on the boy periodically, but he told the holiday guests who came over that day that Ricky had gone to his grandmother's house. Finally, he realized Ricky was nearly dead, but rather than call for help, he said he covered the boy with a blanket and pulled a hat down over his face. Now imagine, or I'm trying to think, in your family or in my family, when they ask, oh, where's so-and-so? And you say he's at the grandmother's house, where in reality they're upstairs in a closet somewhere. Just imagine that scene. Like, what kind of environment was this? Finally, when he realized Ricky was nearly dead, Raul said several times that he didn't call police until the next day because he didn't want Cathy to know Ricky was dead. She had cancer, and he was afraid of what the stress would do to her. He said, I did kill him, but I didn't mean to. Raul told police, there's no reason to kill a kid like that, or hit him, or abuse him, or whatever, you muppet. During the first portion of the interview, Raul never mentioned Conrad, whose body police found encased in concrete in a trash can in their Corona home. The police were then notified that there was another brother who just happened to be missing. They returned to the home and found the body of 13-year-old Conrad. A relative who took care of the boys for almost a year said they had been bouncing from relative to relative for at least 5 years. Conrad's body had been stuffed inside of a trash can that was covered in plastic and duct tape, then encased in concrete and stored on the carport of their home. You remember earlier when Rosa wanted the children back and they claimed Conrad had ran away? Well, they actually took his life as well. The elder sisters of Conrad and Ricky were among about a dozen weeping relatives and friends of the boys who gathered at the home of another of the boys' aunts at the time of death. They were too emotional to speak to the media. The family had set up a memorial to the boys consisting of candles and photographs depicting Conrad and Ricky as babies and as young children in Halloween costumes. One of the sisters had requested that police make a welfare check on the boys in Washington, but never heard back prior to the boys' deaths. The last time any of the relatives talked to Ricky was on Christmas. They said when he told them that he missed his mother and he wanted to come home. Raul admitted that Conrad died after rounds of disciplining on August 22nd, 2005. After the family began to become suspicious, he told authorities that they came up with the story of the older gay lover to cover up the murder. When the family moved from Washington to California, they brought Conrad with them. So yes, when they moved to California, they took a dead body with them. Mate, what? It was around this time that they began to think about the necessity of taking Ricky's life, as he had witnessed the murder of his brother. The autopsy of Ricky showed a history of severe abuse, including old fractures, bruises, contusions, and what appeared to be cigarette burns over his entire body. Riverside County Deputy Medical Examiner Dr. Mark Fajardo found multiple external traumatic injuries according to a pre-trial brief filed by the prosecution. They said that scars on Ricky's body was consistent with being whipped with an electrical cord or similar instrument. It is said that Ricky's scrotum was damaged with a penetrating laceration and his scrotal sac was severely damaged. There were multiple scars to Ricky's scalp, primarily centered on the back of his head. He also had a severe infection on the back of his legs. Witnesses had reported that they had seen Raul and Cathy abuse the children. Cathy was reported to have treated Ricky as a personal slave, ordering him to clean up after her and her children. Deputy District Attorney John Aki told jurors during the trial that Cathy abetted and took an active part in her husband's violent abuse of Ricky Morales and the boy's brother Conrad. Aki reminded jurors that Cathy was the only one in the household who smoked, and an autopsy revealed numerous cigarette burns on Ricky's body, including some on the child's genitals. She took out her cigarettes on the boy's genitals. That's torture. That's worse than abuse. Torture and abuse might be the same thing, but torture has a different weight to it. You see what I'm saying? What is wrong with these people? The district attorney said, there's some kind of sadistic intimacy when you do that. You're up close. You have to strip the victim's clothes off. Yes, it's a conscious choice. When Ricky was asked by friends how he had received a black eye or bruise, the boy responded that he had been in a fight, an excuse Cathy instructed the child to use, according to the district attorney. So her lawyer, Rossetti, he mentioned to the jury that there's at least 2 incidences where Cathy was abused by Raul. It was reported that Raul choked and pushed his wife into a wall. The attorney argued Raul mentally tormented his wife, who went along with whatever her husband wanted to do out of fear for what might happen to the couple's 2 small children. Now, you've all seen trial footages and you've seen defense attorneys give opening statements, blah, 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 right? In many cases where the suspect is so guilty, right, that it's just a matter of time before they get convicted, the attorney will just come up with an idea, yeah, he was abused and this and that, or she was abused, blah, 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 blah. So it's no surprise that she claimed, well, my husband abused me and mentally he forced me to do this, right? It's as if these kind of attorneys or these kind of arguments put in a court case, it's just there to fill a gap in time, to fill a box by saying, yes, this person had the right to a trial, went to due process, was found guilty, blah, 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 blah. But me and you, we know that no amount of abuse is going to make you put a cigarette on a child, you dumb fuck. Police and neighbors say the boys grew thin, while Raul and Cathy and their 2 children showed no signs of undernourishment. No autopsy reports were available for Conrad, but it is a safe bet that his body had the same evidence of abuse that Ricky's had. Both Raul and Cathy were charged with first-degree murder and child endangerment, with a special circumstance of inflicting torture in the death of Ricky. Cathy, in her trial, previously mentioned that she suffered from battered wife syndrome and had no knowledge of mistreatment or abuse of either Ricky or Conrad, though Raul did admit to administering the beating that led to Ricky's death. He claims that the death was unintentional and an accident. In many ways, I can kind of see that. If you're going to kick the boy in the stomach, you're not necessarily trying to take his life. But if you get electrical cords and cigarettes put out on him, in many ways, maybe that's worse. It's a slow death, if you kind of know what I'm saying. Recalling Raul's own words to investigators, District Attorney Aki said the defendant threw the boy in a bedroom closet, and when Ricky tried to open the closet door, Raul stomped him several times. The child died in the closet and remained there for hours until Cathy called 911. Investigators allege that their house began abusing Ricky and Conrad within weeks of the boys' arrival at the couple's Randall, Washington mobile home in late 2004. Now, regarding Raul's defense, his attorney said, well, we should consider second-degree murder because Raul had no intent. In his closing arguments, Victor Marshall, one of Raul's 2 attorneys, said the boys had a rocky relationship with their mother, and their aunt and uncle at first provided them a happy home. Marshall described Raul as someone who had been abused when he was young and had an almost childlike mentality. He pointed to testimony that Raul had been prescribed Effexor, a drug that treats depression and anxiety, and that he had trouble controlling his anger. The family, which included Raul and Cathy's 2 young children, was struggling financially, and Raul did everything he could for his wife. In a journal entry that was shown in court, Conrad wrote about other family members being punished when Cathy had a bad day. Victor Marshall suggested that Cathy was the one in control of the family. She was the puppeteer who pulled her husband's strings. So Cathy claimed, no, he controlled me. He claims, no, she controlled me. And I think me and you can agree, they're both just a bunch of wankers. In his initial closing remarks, District Attorney Aki again showed photos of injuries to Ricky's body. He reminded jurors of a pathologist's testimony that some of the bruises, abrasions, and wounds that looked like cigarette burns and marks made with an electrical cord occurred days or even weeks before the boy's death. The forensic pathologist, Dr. Fajardo, said that bruises, lacerations, and scars on the body of the 11-year-old Ricky Morales showed he suffered repeated injuries, some at least a month before his death on Christmas Day 2005. When he died, the boy had a split upper lip, abrasions on his face, and marks under his chin. There were bruises and scabs on Ricky's torso and lower body, and Fajardo said Ricky had a severe infection on the back of his upper thighs. These injuries are of various ages and are in various states of healing, he said. Some of them are days old, some of them are weeks old, and some of them are well healed and scarred over. But on June the 26th, 2009, the jury did not buy any of these excuses given by Raul and Cathy. They were found guilty and they were sentenced to death. The lives and deaths of Ricky and Conrad Morales is a sad commentary on the current state of child protective services. Two states, California and Washington, both failed to protect these children. Even after multiple complaints of abuse and neglect, time after time, CPS failed to take appropriate action. The end result, the death of two boys. So here's my conclusion. The question remains, what is it inside of Raul that made him act in this manner? The psychologists during the trial said, well, he was abused as a kid and he takes this into his elder life and this kind of behavior becomes normal. Okay, we've seen that before. But I think sometimes people prey on weakness. People look at someone else, someone small and diminished, and they think, oh, I'm going to step on him. And the reason why they want to step on them is because they feel weak and powerless themselves. They don't have control. They don't have any meaning. They don't have any purpose. What they lack is certainty. Certainty is something we crave as human beings. Some people need to control others to have a sense of power. Some people need to control others to have a sense of purpose. And some people need to see the fall of others to make them feel better about their own existence. Unfortunately, in the case of these two boys, this manifested in torture. You see, me and you can kind of, in our head, we can kind of understand in a weird way, okay, you get pleasure out of seeing a friend or someone you dislike having a bad time in life, right? Like, you know, sometimes seeing someone fall can make us feel good in a way, right? But when it comes to children, when it comes to kids, there's no single context you could ever put where we would say, yeah, I understand. Because Raul and Cathy, we don't understand. In many ways, I do think the death penalty for this is correct. It does seem light. They kind of get away with it. They don't have to face the world, right? They don't have to face the backlash. Maybe in jail, but we don't get to see that. But in many ways, the death penalty does seem fine. Comment, tell me what you think.